boot. No juice.
There's no juice.
No juice.
We'll probably need to need to place the no, we're here because we'll need to plug it in into the.
Okay.
If that part's still working. Well, they rewired the thing. Our wonderful, illustrious IT department.
All right. Juice, or should I run on batteries?
Yes, it's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad, yeah.
You can try this, because this one I know works.
There's no juice either. Okay.
But if that doesn't work, we have this one that plugs into the wall over there. Oh, I bet that's our only option.
I'll have a...
Other option is...
You know what? Maybe this. Hey, Sid, maybe this needs to go in.
Oh, yeah. No.
No?
No juice.
No juice down there. Okay. So what do we... Is there a plug over there?
We can try that. I got a relatively long thing.
And this is definitely not a happy camper.
Yep.
Oh, it works on yours.
Well, let's see if it's...
Well, I took a wrench to it last time, but I couldn't get it out far enough. It appears to be happy this time. Let's see. Laptop. Projector is on.
Oh, see something on it. I'm not sending. I'm not sending it.
Trying to see if they're working out.
It's got some. Yeah, in it. It should send back signal. This thing is, Lenovo has some really crazy security chip in it. Nobody is actually ever telling what it does. So the outer perception is that it takes twice or three times as long to do. See the thing, contacting security chip.
Okay.
And Skynet will take over next week.
The cable.
Cable looks okay. I'm not even sure that the outlet on the wall still works.
We have a
Because of
backup
the
computer.
rewiring.
Or you can feed this if it's got PowerPoint.
Yeah, it's got PowerPoint.
Oh,
there you go.
It's all going through. That's the security. I have, open the thing. It's fastener technique in bad places. Okay.
I was like,
Hey, that's good.
Yep.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Computer Science Colloquium. Next week, if my memory serves me correctly, we'll be hearing from one of our alumni, somebody who started a business in Petaluma and tell us how it worked out. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to senior engineers from Verayo, Sid and Mandel. They are going to tell us, reveal the secrets of non-clonable chips. So let's welcome them.
Thanks. We'd like to thank Professor Lee for giving us the opportunity to be in this wonderful place. And let's go ahead with the presentation. As you've noticed, we work for a small startup called Verayo, formerly known as PUFco. And our basic product is PUF, which stands for Physical Unclonable Function. It was researched at MIT, and which led to a patent by MIT in the realm of PUFs realized in silicon in chips. And this effort was led by Professor Srini Devadas, who is also founder of our company, which all happened in a time frame of 2003 and till 2005. And after that, the company formed and grew. We have now up to about 12 people, so we're really tiny. And we're going to focus today on these things, including examples and some discussion on how our PUF, our core technology, can be used in the practice. Now, why do we even focus on things like that? The mechanism of identifying somebody or something is really ancient. We look at people's faces and see that they're the ones we remember, and that's really the principle by which identification works. You remember a previous sample of something you believe is true, and later you compare it with a new sampling, and you realize whether that is close enough to be trustful or not. In the realm of human interaction, when we add science, we keep adding things like fingerprints, technology older than 100 years. Nowadays, we try to do a lot with DNA, although in reality, DNA is quite noisy in its worldwide use, as there are known cases of collision where two people that are not actually related, through the methods the DNA testing is giving us, you can still have serious doubt whether they're related or not, and whether they committed crimes and such things. So increasingly in our society, with increasing population, we see the need for identification where a person or a thing is needed to be trusted. And the trust comes from a chain of identification through authentication, where we are convinced it is the right thing or person, to the point where we trust it. In the hardware world, in a world where people or animals are not involved, we'd like to make this machine usable. One of the examples of things we can use is a naturally occurring randomness, and naturally occurring variations in the nature are represented in an example of a snowflake, which in its infinite variety is never found the same, although if you defocus enough, all the snowflakes suddenly appear the same. So it is a matter of method by which we observe the snowflakes or evaluate them to see whether they're different enough or not. And one advantage of snowflakes is that they also come quite cheap, although there's nothing else tied to them, so we don't have any other better use for snowflakes. In the case of silicon circuitry, we have a possibility to create, thanks to the invention of Professor Davis and others, to create a simple circuit that has the essential properties of a snowflake, but it is at the same time digitally measurable and provides enough confidence to us to create a relationship of trust. Those are claims, and I'd like to convince you that these are based on some real, simple, natural occurrences inside the circuitry, which we'll focus on later in this talk. But what I'd like you to notice, this is our chip, the smallest one we got, and this is its floor plan. The chip size is, the area is roughly half a square millimeter, and the circuit, which is unique, is only a minuscule part of it. It's this purplish thing above the orange band. The rest is circuitry that, in this case, actually this is the part which interfaces with the world, rather few powerful transistors. This is digital logic. This part is a RFID receiver transmitter. This part is memory. And this little square is 256 bits of RAM, volatile memory. This part is the memory, the non-volatile memory. And this is a charge pump that makes voltage out of thin air, literally, since we power this chip not by some battery, but by radio waves that talk. The world of PUF is governed by randomness. The better randomness we get, the better our technology works. In the case, we try to contrast this with another concept in security, which is a secret or a key. The key that originates with people or machines has to be known at some point, has to be stored somewhere, and all these avenues, all these repositories, create issues with security, with possible leaks, and sometimes with revocation. If you know a password, the only way to stop you from accessing whatever it is protected by the password is to change the password at that place. Nobody can make you forget unless they damage you seriously. So in our case, we're aiming towards rights controlled not by what you know, but what you own. You own a little, really cheap piece of silicon, which at the time you need to be taken off from the list of approved people you surrender. And that is a secure way which can be tested that you surrendered the right thing. And that is one of the ways how to improve things. What we're also saying is that we're not replacing or displacing keys and secrets. We're simply enhancing the possibilities of what you can do with silicon-based security. These are the two examples of specific technology and schematic, simplified schematics that we focus on. Both are based on a best measurable property of a randomly occurring thing inside a silicon chip, and that's its timing. When it gets manufactured, a chip is manufactured within a certain specifications where you design it specifically so that it can function in a variety of environments and under different loads, and you always count on the worst case. But when you measure it really carefully, you find that there are paths that are otherwise identical that have slightly different timing because the paths are not really identical. Just like the branches on the snowflake. Those are really not quite the same. They're all slightly different. And that's the thing we measure. Here, we have an example of a ring oscillator. If you look at this circuit and did any electric design before, this looks like nonsense. goes kind of around and around. And it happens to, if you power the circuit, it happens to oscillate at a natural frequency that is given just by the properties of the chip. This is not a design that you would normally find in regular circuits. People who build these things, and these are also used to generate random numbers sometimes, put them in the circuit specifically so that they get something special. Now, in this case, we have two circuits that are being compared by an up and down counter, and naturally, in this field, we would see that on the same chip, two circuits identically produced, totally identical, side by side, would produce slightly different frequencies. And if you do the design right, they actually do it across temperatures and voltages reliably. One is faster, one is slower. And that's what we measure. Now we make a lot of these and collect the information from that. And that's the base for our ring oscillation, the ring oscillator version of the PUF. The other possibility that we focused on is a race condition. If you heard that term, it means that two signals, or actually one signal that is split at some point, is racing through a maze of circuitry that is, in our case, manufactured exactly for the same size. However, you cannot make it so precise through the manufacturing. Random things happen. A layer of atoms here, a little bit askew of the wire there. What you get is a condition that appears at the end of the maze, and one of the signals will be in minuscule time units, nanoseconds or less, faster than the other. Reaching the flip-flop when prime is an undecided state. Who comes first? And one of the signals comes first, and that is captured by this little circuit, and either 1 or 0 comes out, and that is specific for that particular circuit. If you manufacture the same thing next to it, it will have different properties. It will be different for that, for the same inputs. Now, if you observe, there's slightly more here, this thing with the green background. That is what we call a challenge. Because it's a maze, it's reconfigurable to have different paths. If you look at it, it's actually just multiplexers crossing around so that it goes this way or straight, each stage. Now, if you feed it with, let's say, 63, 64 in this case, such stages, you can input to the circuit 63 bits of information, and you get one bit out, and that bit is unique per circuit. Then you continue feeding it more numbers, you get more output there. That is, in essence, what we will focus on today, this circuit, because it takes us straight forward to statistical properties that hopefully will convince you that we have something there that can be used as a secure element in chips. The name for this, we gave it a name, Multiplexer PUF, also in literature sometimes called arbiter PUF because of the flip-flop at the end being called arbiter. The whole circuit is a little bit more complicated than the one I showed you before. The circuit you've seen just recently is this one vein. We use two of them, and I'll explain why. And we also use a multiplexer on the line of the challenges so that certain types of attacks can be thwarted. I will not go into the detail now because it's complicated to take too long. But what we need is a source of these challenges. Something that is deterministic, reliable, and pseudo-random if we can. We use LFSR, linear feedback shift register. Also, you would find the same circuit for CRC. This is basically the same shift register with some XOR feedbacks in there. For this purpose, suffice to say that with every advancement step, this provides numbers, unique numbers, to the PUFs as challenges and can be seeded by the user. So you start with a number, and it produces a series of pseudo-random but repeatedly generable numbers. Here, these PUFs generate results, all is controlled by a common clock. We have a pipeline of flip-flops to capture and combine the outputs of these two chains. And ultimately, we XOR, logically multiply the results together, receiving a single bit on the output per one state of the LFSR. The reason why we combine it here together is that for the attacker it's much harder to go backwards through this function and through the pipeline into two PUFs, not knowing what came from and how. And also by mixing things in the XOR function, very simple one, we get better statistical distribution of the randomness generated by the PUF. It's nicely distributed, we're going to focus on. One thing I would like to stop with is this part. These are layout examples of how the circuitry actually looks on the chip. And you notice they're rather regular. That's the prime directive for building circuits like this. And that is, everything must be, each part of this must be symmetric or in some direction, way, or axis. That way, we guarantee that all the circuits are manufactured identical, they're specified identical, and the only remaining difference is the one that comes from the manufacturing variations that are entering the process randomly and frozen by the chip being made. Now, this is an elementary curve that describes the property, the basic operation of the challenge-response pair. Remember, we feed a challenge, we get a response. Now what we do actually, we feed one challenge, then we get a series of numbers from the LFSR, we collect a series of bits in the output. In this case, we've collected 256 bits. And collecting fewer bits is kind of futile because we need some strength to operate with some depth on which these answers go. What you do really with the chip is you ask it a question and get an answer of a certain size. Then what you look at is this. If you have the same chip, you ask it twice the same question. Did I get the same answer or not? If you have another chip, you ask it the same question. How different is that answer? How far away is the string of bits in count of bits? You heard this under the term Hamming distance or code distance in general. So in this example, we have chosen 256 bits. And these curves represent, the blue curve represents the same chip being asked twice, over and over, different challenges. The statistical distribution here is very close to binomial. And you see that for the 256-bit response and for a XOR and the two PUFs, we are getting roughly 30 on average. 30 bits out of the 256 will be randomly different. The rest of them will be on average same. Now we have something. We can, if we tolerate this many bits different, we know there are this many same. But if we ask two chips, no, this looks like perfectly random, two things that have nothing to do together. If you ask a random number generator and another one, it's fully unrelated, you get exactly this curve. The average number of bits in the response then will be the half of the size you asked for. And with this distribution, now, if you want to tell whether the chip is genuine or not, you ask it a series of questions, you get a series of answer bits, and then we need to tolerate correctly where to go. We would go somewhere in the middle and say, if the answer was less than 80 bits, if the answer had more than 80 bits different, no, it's a wrong chip. If it was less than 80-bit different, matched more than the rest of 256, it is most likely the correct chip. Now, it is really hard to do that on a flat curve like that. So for that, we need to do another curve, which is, because we don't really care whether it was less than 80 or up to 80, we accumulate, we integrate this way, and we get it on a logarithmic scale so that we can easily read the really small things. We get a new set of curves. Now it's the same distribution, binomial approximately. In one case, a very small p, roughly 0.15. This is a p of probability of half. That's what the two unrelated random number generators would give you. Now we can see what confidence we have in that answer. The confidence is here in parts per million. So 1 stands for, it's 1 in a million chance the answer was wrong. On that, we can tell that the proper threshold was indeed somewhere near 80, where these curves tell us that the chance of being wrong is less than 1 in a billion. We can live with that. The chip will not last that many questions. And your reader will probably fail, or you will be distracted and not pay attention. Something happens that's a lot less rare than this chip failing. So that would be a good point for the simple question. We will see later how that relates to us asking the question in different scenarios. But here, let's stick with this. This, again, is a curve that represents a failure rate. Whatever threshold you choose for your operation, that point on the curve tells you how often will it fail. Now, this is a cumulative curve, so whatever happens here includes all the failures to the left. Whatever happens here includes all the failures to the right. So that is really a worst case scenario curve. We have experimented with the PUF a lot and came to different configurations that give us different results. And these curves change, and I'd like you to get a glimpse on that and see how changing the configuration, changing the number of XORs, perhaps changing the number of response bits, affects how confident you can be. But the basics remain the same. We ask a question, get an answer, tolerate some bits that are, we call them noisy, and we have a curve that tells us how confident we can be. This is an example for different sizes. If we ask for 128 bits, the confidence is worse, but we say to ourselves some time. In some cases, confidence of 1 in 100,000 is good enough. Now, remember, the fact that these guys intersect doesn't mean anything particular, because those are basically two graphs just overlaid over another, but they relate. Well, you always want, if you want to balance the situation, place the threshold where these curves go lowest for both cases. Now here, this was the same example I gave you in bigger size. That's the 256 bits response. And here, a 512 bits response. Now, if we're operating in a powered network environment, getting 256 out of something is really cheap and easy. So if this would go, let's say, into your phone, I would easily advocate you should call it 1 kilobit and have really good confidence and never fail. Because we can afford it. In the phone, it's fast and has power plenty. What we do with this is we put it in a passive radio signal powered chip. every single piece of information is paid by a lot of timing and power. So we have to seek to compromise. So far, it looks like for most cases, if we run here, 256 is good enough. Now we can also change the number of XORs. And this is what we get. Again, middle is the same reference size. If you increase the number of XORs, the curves scoot together. If you decrease the number of XORs, the curves grow apart. However, you can also notice that they go kind of crooked. This thing is no longer as nice binomial as it was before. It's kind of rounded. And here, these curves look nicer, more closer to the theoretical, but we pay for it by extra noise moving up and having less wiggle room for the threshold. And sure enough, the confidence goes down. So we balance it, and the good news here is that our design allows for knobs, turning and changing where you want to operate it. You choose, and it's straighter. You pay for it in size of the circuit, in time it takes to do it, and in memory it takes to operate if you need to store anything about it. And that concludes this part of the curves. What I'd like to move on is another topic on the spectrum of what can be done with the data, which is the first thing when we hit actual production. People ask us, okay, what does it do with temperature? What does it do with voltage? What does it do when we put it in a different process? What does it do? So I have one example of such an answer, and that is we put it in the oven, we put it in the fridge. That's what such thing where you can actually control that thing. And run it in a range of -25 degrees C to +85. After that, the 85 was tough because when we put the chips in the plastic card as they normally go, like for ticketing, the plastic was all shrivel, so we have to put it in the middle thing. But you see, the principle remains the same. You see a lot more wiggle on the noise part, which is expectable. You know, running things under different temperature changes the speed with which the circuit operates, but it doesn't change the fact that each chip is very unique and different. Now, how does this become an unclonable chip? It doesn't. It's not a miracle. You can obviously clone it, but the expense and the effort is rather steep. You can clone it by making a complicated circuit that mimics the same properties of one individual chip we make. You can make it. You can make a simulation in a computer that does that. Now try to get on the bus with it. You know, if it's a ticket. It can be done. I can imagine doing it. But it's harder. And you know, there is no unbreakable cipher. There are just ciphers that are good enough. There is no unclonable chip. That's why you often find in our literature the unclonable enclosed. It's when it comes to practice, it's too impractical to clone. And one of the things you would have to do is you have to measure the chip. It's really difficult to do that. You actually have to get real close to it if you want to measure it directly. The delays that combined together in that circuit are tough to measure. And most of the time you would ruin the chip in the process. So the techniques to get to it are tough. That's why we, in the market, we call it unclonable. Because for practical purposes, that's what people might like and buy. Now, move on. This is an example of where you choose, where you operate it. One example is a door axle. You don't want to get anybody who is not exactly the person you gave the chip to. And you don't mind that once in 3 years or 5 years, depending how often the person goes anymore, he will have to do twice. Okay, that's no problem. Because we chose a confidence rate of 1,000, 1 in 1,000 cases, even if he's got a good chip, the thing will go, oh no, too much difference. So he will have to beep again. Then we simply have a threshold of 33, 32, 31. This is 30 actually, this. 28, yeah. 30, 30. And since we don't ever mess with the red curve, we don't really worry about it. It's way below usability. So in the door opener case, you see you can choose on this side of things. Pick a threshold that's strict. And yeah, the user might have to do it, authenticate twice to get through. Well, the opposite case, for the same type of operation, which is access, you want to get somewhere, is when you have a mass transit ticket. This is an oyster. You don't want in the rush hour, people, oh, can get in. The crowd grows. So, and of course anybody can crawl, not everybody, but plenty of people can crawl the fences and jump the building. So, you let every 10,000 fake intruder, 1 in 10,000 attempts will succeed and get through, get close enough. If you just throw random numbers at it, 1 in 10,000, if you do something more elaborate, you may have a better rate, but I'd like to see how you do that. But you get this confidence rate. But then we're also operating on this curve. So how does a legitimate customer get in? Well, the confidence rate is roughly 1 in 20 million. I think we can handle that. 1 in 20 million won't stop people from going through multiple entry points. So that is how you choose in this simplified example where to operate depending on the use case. Now, our company is obviously trying to sell this as much as possible. And so let's look at things that we do when it hits the actual world. Authenticating chips. A lot of chips are made in China, or things are manufactured in China from chips made elsewhere. And not all the chips that come back are the same. There was a famous case with a famous network gear provider that sold a lot of gear to government, US government. But none of the gear was actually manufactured by them. And the government is still trying to figure out what the chips do that they actually got. But they were not the original chips that the manufacturer wanted to be in them. So what we propose is that at the time when a chip is made in a reasonably trusted place, we have our circuit make part of the chip, inseparable. And we collect the challenge and response pairs in database on computer. And we keep them separate. Then the chip ships. And in an assembly house, which may not be in a friendly territory, you can still validate whether the chip is right, whether you got the right thing, using one of the questions, or multiple questions with the proper answer you validate. Now the distributor that gets the let's say, assembled board or assembled gadget gets a different set for the same chip. Now they don't need to know each other, and even if they did, this doesn't help them, doesn't break any security. Of course, if this is a bad guy, knowing this would help him because he can actually provide that, but only for one chip at a time. And then that chain can be extended. Customers could verify by Rolex, this is certainly not one. Is that a real Rolex? It's got a thing in it. A modern phone, you could actually check. And if you return it, you could try return something else. And the store can check that you're returning a genuine article. All this without much complication. So that is our application for anti-counterfeiting. Things simply can prove that they are what they claim to be.
I just want to make a comment that in the scheme that Verayo is using for supply chain authentication, there are certain advantages present in this scheme that is not present in conventional schemes. And I can think of two. The first is that to authenticate a chip or a device, there is no provisioner that needs to put anything into the device. And if you think about it, using the natural manufacturing variation of the device to authenticate it is the most accurate and most trustworthy way to authenticate something. So that's the first advantage. Nothing needs to be put in by anybody to authenticate the device. And the second property is that there are many facets of the manufacturing variation that can be extracted from the device itself in the form of multiple challenge and response databases. So in this particular setup, the distributor does not even need to trust the assembly house. And even if the assembly house database is stolen and is compromised, the distributor can still authenticate the chip with an extremely high level of assurance because the database is distinct. So with conventional schemes, we do not believe that you can readily and naturally support this kind of authentication model to protect the supply chain for the entire life of the product.
Want to talk more?
Go ahead.
Okay. We briefly touched on the oscillators and on the fact that we actually focus on a wider application of this rather than authentication. We also work in the area of key generation. One of the things that the PUF can lead to is a very robust and reliable generation of a key that is not known to anybody. It is only known to the device itself. And that can open a multitude of uses in combination with cryptography, where this simply feeds a standard trusted cryptography engine. And the result, encrypted, is not breakable by things like social engineering. There is no currency involved in moving or in generating. And the other property that our key generation offers is this. If you want to store a key, you need to have a memory in which it gets stored. That memory can be scanned in wider variety of ways from the chip cold without powering it up. Where some chips have circuitry that prevents attackers from discovering things while powered down. While powered down, these defenses cannot operate properly. But memories like flash can be scanned perhaps with a microscope or similar things without powering the memory up. Because the charge is still there and you can see the difference on an electron scanning microscope. It's an example of that kind of attack. So in our case, the key is only remembered, recalled from the hardware, from the way things are not quite regular in the chip when it is powered up. As soon as power goes up, poof, you're gone. And of course, this being a general source of reliable entropy, if you will, can lead to generation of all types of keys and applications and scenarios. But the take-home message is, in its strongest variant, it is not ever disclosed to any other entity than the very smallest circuitry on the chip itself. This slide concludes our presentation with a marketing overview of what we strive to hit. And the authentication mechanisms are basically addressing anti-counterfeiting and access rights, where the strength of the technology is not combined with cryptography. Just questioning the proper answers from the chip alone can open use cases and simple identification and authentication in that area. Now, with keys and cryptography, stronger and more reliable trust testing can be done. With banking, we put actually a lot of money on it, with mobile payments, and authenticating hardware that's sensitive, and tying information and use of hardware and software to particular physical piece of silicon. Now, if I conclude, the only thing that we can do is to prove with enough certainty that that piece of silicon is the same one we remember from before. It's the only thing we can do. And there's plenty we can do with it. There's no magic. There's no miracle. It just works. We've been doing this for quite a while. So we hope we get rich with it. I hope you like it. Thank you.
So do you have these chips in anything today that we would have on us?
Yeah. Not you. Because selling it is a completely different thing. I have it somewhere. One of these cards. Yeah, sure. I won't have it when I want to show it. It's a sticker. Yeah. It's one thing. One of the things that we're working with is NFC phones are coming out strong. But there'll be a lot of people without them, and they'll have things like this, which has no applications, nothing, no antennas for NFC. Now, what we can do is place such a sticker on the phone, and as smartphones start getting used for payments, we can supply the lower end with these, and the reader will still take it and we stick it on the phone or wallet or whatever. So that's one of the things we can do.
So there's a circuit in that sticker?
Yeah, there's a chip. You can feel it. Is it water? Can be made waterproof. It actually works on a metal base too with different type of backing, ferrite backing. If you ever had any access card, it's just a very similar chip. Doesn't do anything special. As it, it's like a little piece of silicon, really flat. It gets bonded, if you worry how this. It only has the chip and the antenna. There's nothing else, and it gets bonded on the antenna with a conductive glue that actually conducts only in vertical directions, so it's not short. There's a big blob of glue. We put the chip on and connects to the antenna.
You mentioned mass transit.
Yes.
How much would it cost?
The chip that you got there is selling for roughly between 7 and 9 cents. If you think about it, we make 35,000 of them on 20 centimeter rate. There's about 100 of them bad. And on the same way, I ran data yesterday from our production sample. We had about 100 failing on 35,000. So, yeah, it's meant to be an experiment.
Have you ever thought of tracking livestock through the process of, birth to actually processing, and distributing?
Actually, in the tracking business, we've dealt with a lot of wineries and similar places that they wanted to track things and make sure. And the problem is mostly in the packaging, not in the technology that we have. So there's more trouble with how to put it on the livestock and make it last, or put it on a wine and make it last, and not let somebody refill it with garbage and still sell it. And that's a real problem. Like, how do you see? We can tie this property to a silicon, but if you move it, you just broke the principle. So yeah, there are challenges. No, we haven't been contacted by anybody with livestock. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, could you inject it into
Yes.
the livestock?
Yes, there is no technology to do that. We would have to develop a different type of chip. This one requires an antenna that is at least this big. There are chip technologies to get a different transceiver on the same size chip that can do a much smaller form factor. So yeah, this one was cheap.
Exactly would you be measuring if it was in wine or animals?
Beg your pardon?
Exactly are you measuring if it's in the wine or the animals? Like, I get that you're measuring the functions of the circuitry with the chips that are in the circuits, but what exactly are you looking at in wine?
Well, in wine, there's nothing different about wine or animals or people getting through to the door. The question we're answering is this the chip or is it not? And if you tie that physically to something, like the card, or to an animal being injected with it, you can then extend that premise to, okay, is this the animal? Right? Or is this the proper bottle of wine? Is it fake or is it not? But again, there's a lot of challenges with people, okay, we can take the chip and place it elsewhere and then claim it being genuine. So, not everything can be solved by just pure technology. It's a lot of packaging and a lot of context.
Other questions? Are you well financed in this economy to
We've been
coverage?
fortunate, well, not for people on our level, we're engineers. We get to work on it. There are others who probably have much better financial interest in this than us. We simply get paid our salary. But the financing is, our company is venture capital finance from a quite wealthy source. Usual Bay Area things. So we've not been hurting and going under. We are now in production. This is something that's got a strange name on it. I don't know who that is. Some customer. I mean, these things are shipping, in other words. So we're making money, but we're not yet profitable.
Other questions? Well, thank you again.
It's the next step to injecting in the people.
I know, that's what I'm thinking.
It's the same idea as livestock.
I actually never know ahead what I'm going to say. Because I'm just playing long.
I didn't want to disrupt flow too much, yeah.
Yes, I never know what I'll say, and I never remember it really that well. So,
Don't worry.
I cannot repeat it.
That's really good.
Well, I try to.
And you timed that really well.
Crush it.
Okay.
Thanks.
No, I'll go to lunch right now.
This is educational backgrounds. Are you EE or? Okay, both of you guys are? Okay. Up to what master's level?
I'm technically back
Oh, nice.
I saw myself on the resume.
Nice. Okay. Oh, cool. Okay. I'm doing EE. Yeah. See it.
Was it good?
Yeah, it's nice.
I was actually you didn't know it.
A master stroke to finish with the marketing rather than begin with the marketing.
Well, it's
Maybe they said,
You know, I'm not amazed. I did have thought.
sure. I'm ready.
Right. That's it.
Learn something about it before you come on. They went to Verayo.com and
Yeah, I definitely have an eating method. That's the woke up like 9:30. What's the answer? 52 on Sorry, 15. It was just like then and
What's up?
Yeah.
I was working at the and look, helped them out, turned it resumes. Yeah.
I mean, you can go ask me. I didn't get anything from that. You just said Martians.
What did you say? Ask. Ask them questions. Good luck.
Okay.
Index cards and all that good stuff.
We're going to start a new topic. So next Thursday, week from today, is our first exam. We've got utility is our last topic to cover. Now, what we're going to do, utility analysis, this will explain why when prices increase, quantity demanded decreases. That's what we're using utility analysis for. And in fact, if you've got your study guide in front of you, what question are we going to work on? What short essay type question does this sound like? Which one? And what does it say?
Utility analysis explain why the demand curve is sloping downward.
Yeah. Now, it's going to take us to get a while. It'll take us a while to get there, right? To be able to actually answer that question. There's a bunch of new concepts that we got to go over. But that's our goal, right? Explain why, using utility analysis, explain why the demand curve is downward sloping. Now, in other words, explain why when right, the demand curve is downward sloping. Okay. These are two ways of saying the same thing. Okay? Two ways of stating the same thing. One is not the answer for the other. Right? And this is a common mistake. You get 0 points. So if I say, explain why the demand curve is downward sloping, and you answer, it's downward sloping because when prices go up, quantity demanded goes down, you're just restating the question. You didn't answer it. It's worth 0 points. Okay? That's a very common response, right, on past exams. If I say, explain why the demand curve is downward sloping, I get this as an answer. It's downward sloping because when prices go up, quantity goes down. That's not an answer. The question is, why, when prices go up, will quantity demanded go down? Right? So I hope that's clear. Right? And that you won't make that mistake.